Hello, hi everyone. I'm Kira Lessin. I'm the co-author of this series called The People of Earth, along with my husband and life partner, Dr. Sasha Alex Lessin. Sasha is an anthropologist who has a Ph.D. from UCLA. Dr. Lessin and I are both students of the late Zecharia Sitchin, who asked Dr. Lessin to make his material available to you. Some 300,000 years ago, Enki, the chief scientist of the Anunnaki gold mining expedition to Earth, left his foreman, Enki, to supervise volunteer gold miners from the planet Nibiru as they excavated gigantic veins of gold in southeast Africa. Enki created a laboratory at Greater Zimbabwe on the Nile Meridian where he could study the plants, animals, and Homo erectus, an intelligent, fire-using hominoid. Homo erectus was a key to adaptations the Anunnaki would need to thrive on Earth.
So 300,000 years ago or so, Enki, his sister Ninmah, and his son Ningishzidda retreated to this lab in Zimbabwe. There, they conducted genetic experiments. One thing they made was freaks, like men with two wings, one with one body and two heads. One was a mixed male and female organs on the same being. Others had legs and horns of goats and other hominoid animal mixtures. They have made many of these hybrid creatures, the so-called mythical creatures of antiquity. The early experiments with genetic engineering created many failures and also some viable creatures like the griffin, the cyclops, mare people, and sphinxes, that is, bulls and lions with human heads. The depictions on ancient temples weren't just myths or figments of imagination. These were creatures that this genetics team actually made. Well, we, of course, know how to do this nowadays using the CRISPR gene editing. And earlier, when people saw these creatures in stone, etched in stone, they just thought it was myth. But we know that we can actually do that now, and we do that. Now, the chief scientist, Enki, his primary focus became the genes of an intuitive, empathetic, intelligent hominoid named Homo erectus. Homo erectus was already on Earth long before the Anunnaki arrived, there 450,000 BCE. Homo erectus had been one of the original proto-humanoids that were adapted to Earth by extraterrestrial terraformers after the Treaty of Hatona to end the Lyran-Draco War, so that Homo erectus had been around a long time and lived in peaceful groups in relative harmony. Next slide.
So Enki, Ninmah, and Ningishzidda studied Homo erectus, an intelligent, fire-using hominoid. Homo erectus is the ancestor of modern Neanderthals, Sasquatch, Bigfoot, Alma. Enki saw erectus as a key to adaptations that the Anunnaki would need to thrive on the Earth. Erectus reasoned. They freed animals from the traps. He communicated telepathically rather than speak. Erectus displayed empathy and compassion for his fellows and other creatures, traits most of the Anunnaki lacked or overrode in their incessant competition for higher status and authority. He seemed by some kind of psychokinetic concentration able to break animals from Lucifer's traps. Erectus, like his descendant Bigfoot, seemed capable of phasing in and out of sight. A few Erectus women let Lucifer take them back to his lab. They may have let themselves be trapped to help and gift Lucifer and Thoth with sex. But the two, even though they had sex with the Erectus women, failed to impregnate these women. The Erectus women intuited that the Anunnaki next wanted over from them. The women agreed. They seemed to know Lucifer thought to create peaceful, cooperative hybrids with Erectus through telepathy and empathy. Thoth and Lucifer gathered their own seed with which they fertilized the Erectus ova and test tubes to create viable zygotes, and they implanted these fertilized zygotes in Erectus women. But the babies the women carried were born blind, and they lacked hand dexterity or failed to function internally. So to beat these defects, Ninmah created the next zygote in a vessel of copper and African clay instead of a test tube. Then, in the clay vessel, the admixture they made, the ovum of a female with Anunnaki male essence they put together. Still, no fetus developed. Ninmah said she thought that an Anunnaki female womb, rather than test tubes or clay vessels, might produce an Anunnaki-erectus, who had a better chance of surviving. Enki volunteered the womb of his wife Damkina, but Ninmah refused to let Damkina, who was her sister wife, risk having an alien fetus of unknown gestation duration within her womb. Instead, Ninmah had Enki insert a hybrid zygote into herself. So she, not Damkina, bore the risk. The fertilized egg into the womb of Ninmah by Enki was inserted, and there was conception. To a male child, Ninmah birth was given.
The miners, while all this was going on in Zimbabwe, the miners in South Africa that had come all the way from Nibiru as volunteers were griping. They'd been under the earth for years, and they didn't have enough beer, and they had no women. And Nugi radioed to Enki in Zimbabwe, and Zimbabwe said, "Hey, well, we miners have a decent gripe. We got to do. I think I'll be able to help them." Next slide, please. So Enki plotted with the volunteers. He said, "Boys, I want you to cut back on the shipments of gold. That's going to bring probably Ninurta, the prime minister for Enlil, or Commander Enlil himself down to the mines. And when he comes, you trap him. And I'll come in and save the day. Just you just do what I say. Just do a slowdown, and this will bring the bosses down, and I'll solve the crisis just in time." Next. So Enki then instigated this mutiny, and it was just his way of justifying his project. He planned to get Enki to accept the plan for Erectus. So what happened when the miners did cut the gold that was flowing up to the next refinement station in Iraq, Badi Batira, Enki sent in Ninurta. Enlil, that is, the boss, sent his prime minister and son, Ninurta, to go investigate. And Ninurta reported that the miners they're backmenting and lamenting. In the excavations, they're grumbling. They're saying, "Unbearable is the toil. Call Enlil, you dad, to the mines." Enki told Ninurta, "Look, go tell your dad, come see how the miners are suffering." So Enlil and his vizier, Nuxu, arrived down at the gold mines. And the miners said, "Let's unnerve Enlil. Let's scare him. Let's make sure that he relieves us of all this heavy work. We'll declare war on him, and we'll use force of arms if we need to. We've got to get relief." They set fire to their tools. They burned their axes, and they surrounded where Enlil was. They took Inugi hostage. Well, Enlil texted his dad, Anu, on Nibiru. He said, "Dad, come down and kill these guys and their instigator. You know damn well who he is, Dad." But Anu didn't do that. The miners wouldn't tell Enlil who was leading them or inciting them, but Anu felt for them. Ninurta wanted new miners from Nibiru, but Enki said, no, we're going to do something better. We're going to create a Lulu, that is a primitive worker, and he'll take over all the hard work. And let the Anunnaki who have been doing all this work go back to Nibiru And as a matter of fact, we don't have to do any work at all. These guys will work for us. And it isn't going to be that hard at all, because the being that we need in order to make this slave race, worker race, let me call it, already exists. All we have to do is put our genes on it a little bit. And then we'll make a primitive worker, a Lulu. And Enki then showed Erectus to Enlil and to Ninurta. And he said, hey, you know, my son, Ninurta, found their DNA structure. It's very similar to ours. It's like two serpents entwined. With our life essence, we'll combine that with Erectus's life essence, and that's how we're going to get a primitive worker. He'll understand our commands, he'll handle our tools, he'll do the work in the mines, and the Enki, what I want to do is send these guys home, the miners that we have here, and use my new workers that I'm making instead. Well, Enlil said, don't make slaves. Slavery from Nibiru has ended a long time ago. Tools should be slaves, not other beings. Make machines, not slaves. Enki said, hey, no. The earthlings we create won't be slaves. They'll be helpers, not slaves. But Enlil shouted back, nah, hybrid beings is against the rules of the planetary journeys. Enki said, look, the new species, it's not going to be a new species. The ape man is going to be like a subspecies of ours. His genotype is just very, very similar to ours. Matter of fact, our ancestors probably look just like Homo erectus. And it's like Homo erectus is due to evolve into us anyhow. And we're just going to speed it up a few million years. Well, Enki and Enlil beamed their dad, King Anu, back on Nibiru. And Anu met with the council. And each brother, Enki and Enlil, had their say about whether they were going to make machines or make beings, helpers. Each brother had his way, said what he wanted. The king and the council ruled. Look, we got to get the gold. Go ahead and make the being. Forget the rules of planetary journeys. We got to save Nibiru. Next.
Enlil believed Enki was making a clone, a being that he could duplicate in his lab, perhaps manufacture in large numbers, but Enlil was naive. In the laboratory Enki built in Zimbabwe for their work, Enki and Ningishzidda and Ninmah experimented, and they spliced genes into their genome. They extracted the Anunnaki genome from Ningishzidda's blood, and they created combinations of this genome and the genome of Erectus. Enki and Ningishzidda serviced Erectus women but failed to impregnate them. So the two men gathered their own seed and put it in test tubes that held the Erectus ova. And these fertilized hybrid zygotes developed from Ningishzidda's sperm in the test tubes, and Ninmah implanted these zygotes surgically into Erectus women. The first babies that were born to the women lacked vision, hand dexterity, or internal functioning. To beat these defects, she grew the next hybrid zygote in a copper and clay vessel instead of a test tube. But this zygote grew into a child who couldn't talk. When Ninmah added copper and the chemicals inherent in the clay from her lab containers and the chemistry of her own body, she birthed a perfect boy, just like a Nibiru boy, but the new hybrid had a foreskin, which Anunnaki males lacked. I want to correct. She put this zygote into her body. So once Ninmah gave birth to Adama, the prototype for the primitive worker, she messaged the med center at Sherpuk. She said she needed 7 doctors to volunteer their wombs for Adama's offspring. His essence alone as a mold shall be. So Ninmah told these volunteers that they'd have to breastfeed and bond with the kids they'd bear, so the children learned emotional responsiveness, language, and intelligent thought. The doctors swore they'd love and support the babies that they would bear. So in 7 vessels of the clay of Absu, Ninmah made oval zygotes with Ningishzidda's and Enki's, which were fertilized by Ningishzidda's and Enki's sperm. And the life essence of Adama she extracted bit by bit in the vessels. and she inserted them. Then in the male part of the Adama, she made an incision, and she took a drop of blood and let this as a sign of life be, that flesh and soul have combined, and let it forever proclaim. She squeezed the male part for blood, one drop in each vessel. To the admixture she added. She said, in this clay's admixture, earthling with Anunnaki shall be bound. To a unity shall the two essences, one of heaven, one of earth, together be brought. In the wombs of the birth-giving heroines, the fertilized ovals were inserted. And Ninmah cut Adamu's 7 healthy boys from their wombs. Okay, that seems to be the same thing.
Yeah, we'll take a look at the picture. Let's
Okay.
pause and look at this. This is a picture of first a drawing that Sitchin rubbed off of a bas relief, and there's the picture of the relief, and another clay rubbing that we have. And these are the volunteer birthing mothers. They did a whole series. First, they make this series of clones, and they're like manufactured. They go through this procedure, birthing these kids. Okay, next slide.
So Tiamat was the hybrid girl. She was white, she had blonde hair and blue eyes like the Nibiru girls. So Ningishzidda, in order to create a female, planted the zygote made with Adamu's blood in Damkina. And our ancestors, Tiamat, carried Damkina's mitochondrial DNA. The Anunnaki geneticists realized the artificially inseminated ovum had to be inserted into the uterus of an Anunnaki, then carried and birthed and suckled and reared by her. When the zygote grew to a viable female fetus, Ninmah excised her from Damkina. So the second child was born, a girl.
This was just for recreation for the males, because they were just making a clone master. But they were very curious what would happen if they put them together. Next.
So Ninmah named this hybrid girl Tiamat, also known as the Mother of Life. Tiamat was a sandy blonde, like Damkina, who was her womb mother. And during this process, Damkina transmitted her mDNA to Tiamat. The successful hybrid of Adamu and Tiamat were carried and nursed by Damkina and Ninmah, and both the Anunnaki women reared and trained the infants. They love these kids.
Let us say that the mitochondrial DNA is passed on, its genetic material passed on to the child from the mother. The father doesn't pass this on. Okay.
Ningishzidda put ova from Tiamat into 7 test tubes. Then he planted the 7 ova in the same doctors who had born the hybrid males. All the surrogate mothers carried female hybrids, which he removed surgically. After the surrogate mothers bore 27 more pairs of clones, Ningishzidda told the doctors he needed their wombs again. But this time Ninmah objected. For my heroines, too burdensome is bearing more earthlings. Too few are the heroines to bear numbers enough to work mines. He left the 7 female and the 8 male hybrids made from Adam's and Tiamat's gametes together in an enclosure at his Zimbabwe lab. And even though they copulated often, the females did not conceive.
It's gametes, incidentally. That means sex cells.
Gametes. I call it gametes. So it's gametes. Okay. In the meantime, the miners again were threatening mutiny if Enki and Ningishzidda didn't bring slaves to relieve them. So under this pressure, Ningishzidda, in the Med Center in Shirpuk, in Iraq, compared Nibiru genes into genes from Adamu and Tiamat, and he found the genes for reproduction. Nibiru females had a recessive XY chromosomal allele and their genotype, whereas Tiamat had only XX. So with this knowledge, Ningishzidda secretly made Adamu and Tiamat breedable. Ningishzidda anesthetized Enki, Ninmah, and Tiamat, and from the stem cell producing rib bone marrow of Enki, the life essence he extracted, and into the rib of Adamu, the life essence he inserted. From the rib of Ninmah, the life essence he extracted, and into the rib of Tiamat, the life essence he inserted. Ningishzidda, with Ninmah's marrow bones, he made the stem cells, and he made Tiamat conscious of herself before Adama developed self-awareness. Ningishzidda proudly declared, "To their tree of life, 2 branches have been added. With procreating powers, their life essences are now entwined." Enki, Ninmah, and Ningishzidda were not satisfied until they came up with a human couple who could be a match for their own minds and culture, who showed the same mental, emotional, and artistic potentials and the abilities to learn and master scientific data and technologies that they themselves had. They wanted the new humanity to know everything about their origin and how and by whom they had been perfected, and how they had mixed the Anunnaki genes with hominid genes, and how much we resembled them in all matters except immortality. Yeah.
The commander, Enlil, ordered Enki to bring Tiamat and Adamu up to their place, his place that he had next to Enlil's place. His place called Eden, the initial place in Iraq where the Anunnaki had settled. Enki, Ninmah, and Ningishzidda did not tell Enlil that Tiamat could breed. And they were brought up to Enki's place right next door to Enlil's in Iraq, and she was pregnant, and her fetus was growing there. And in the course of making love up there, they ate some psychedelic fruit. Matter of fact, Ninmah had planted this, and this was at the time they ate this. Tiamat had a Kundalini experience, and she felt her oneness with Adam, and she felt everything in the universe, the kind of things that any of you that may have ingested LSD have probably experienced. She really reached an awakened state of higher consciousness. And it was not just from the whatever the psychedelic was that they took from Ninmah's tree, but it was paired with their sexuality, just as modern people do in Tantra. Now, Tiamat was so excited after that, she started doing all kinds of creative things. She made tables out of branches. She made clothes out of leaves. She was really happy. And there's the artist's idea of Ninmah's tree, and of course, the snake in the garden is the way Bible writers talk about the notion that she should make love with Adam when she was already doing sex with Adam. Her body and his body knew each other. She was already pregnant when she went up to Iraq. In absolute joy and bliss, she adorned herself. With pride and intelligence, her new mental acuity, she distinguished and singularized her newly felt body and vulva. In exultation, she clothed herself. Well, when Enlil, who visited Enki's place, he saw Tiamat was wearing a loincloth with leaves, and Adamu was still running around naked. Tiamat, just like any other bright little girl, marched up to Enlil and said, "Hi, Uncle. Look what I made. See this? I made it myself." And she shows her apron to him. Enlil gets mad. He says, "Enki, you better explain this. This child looks like she's pregnant." Yeah, boss, it's true. She is pregnant and she's going to breed. Enlil said, "The last bit of our life essence to these creatures you have given to be like us in procreation knowing. perchance our life cycles to them you also gave them, huh? Did you do that? Nah, boss, I didn't do that. Enki's team had exceeded Enlil's okay to clone mind slaves in test tubes or with the surrogate Nibiru mothers. He had not given his okay for breedables. Enlil arrested Enki. He had him tethered, as you can see in the drawing there. He's in a restraint. He calls for a trial. I want you, he said to the assembly, to judge Enki, and he was insubordinate. The assembly just ignored Enlil's orders, and they just said, untie the chief scientist, please. Well, Enlil said, well, get them out of here anyway. You want them to breed? Let's go take them back to Africa. Let them breed there, and let their kids breed, let their kids' breed, make plenty of them, and don't bother me with these creatures. Next. So Enki put Adamu and Tiamat in an enclosure in Zimbabwe, and they gave all kinds of instruction and play and talk with these kids. They really educated these children like their own children, because they were their own children. So they're going to Africa. And Enki found the ones that were the most intelligent of all, and he taught them the deeper truth. Look, we're not gods. We're just people from a different planet, and here's how we made you, and here's what we discovered about how the man Piaba and the woman Piaba and all that, and that's how the genetics work, and that's how it is. And we got to keep all this stuff secret from the boss, because he doesn't want you to be. We can't let him know how smart you are, but we'll call ourselves the Brotherhood of the Snake, because the boss calls me a snake because I did all this sneaky stuff, but that's our secret, the Brotherhood of the Snake. You know darn well we're not gods. We're just people, and we did genetics on you. Enki knew that they were going to need this information probably by the time of the 20th century or so, or maybe the 21st century. We'd have to know all this stuff. Okay, next. Well, when the Anunnaki in Iraq learned that Enki had all these workers working in the mines, and not only that, at his palace in Zimbabwe, and he had gardens, and they did all the cooking and the gardening and stuff that the Anunnaki had to do themselves. They wanted slaves too, and so Ninurta kept nagging his dad, I want to get some of these slaves too. So finally, Enlil said, okay, you can do it. And he gave him an artillery weapon. So up to this time, Enki had let his earthlings just roam free in the wilderness. Sometimes Ningishzidda went with them. But when he heard that Enki's sons were agitating for slaves, he built a wall around the workers' homes, so that in case they came to raid, they couldn't just grab people. Well, Enlil didn't want any problems with his dad, so he cut communication with Nibiru so that Anu couldn't forbid this raid. And Ninurta took the weapon, and he took 50 Anunnaki raiders, and he blew a hole in the fence, and he grabbed lots and lots of workers, both male and female. He took them naked back to Iraq, and there they worked the mansions, the gardens, the orchards, and the cities. And they'll even let them breed the slaves that he brought up to Iraq. All the Anunnaki in Enlil's plan were going to return to Nibiru and just leave Earth to the slaves. That was what he was thinking at the time. So it went well. Slaves from these slaves were digging the gold in South Africa. They loaded it on the boats. The boats were taken up to Iraq. It was rocketed from there to Mars. From Mars, it was refined some more, sent on out to Nibiru, and it was there on Nibiru, refined into fine powder, and floated up into the atmosphere, and it was actually filling the hole in the ozone that and making a general blanket over the atmosphere. Next. And the Anunnaki, we don't quite know how all they did it, but they had these all over the South East Africa. You have these lines of magnetic granite over which, using sonar and methods we don't quite know about yet, transporting water uphill and ore downhill and making everything work as they got the veins of earth underneath it. And this elaborate pattern is still there for miles and miles and miles. Next. That's a close-up of some of the energy grids. Next. So they were just told, basically, look, all you guys got to do is work and find gold. Yeah, I know it seems silly. What was this yellow stuff for? But we'll take care of you. We'll give you food. We'll give you a place to live. Just continue to multiply. And of course, Enki and Ninmah were giving all kinds of information to their favored Anunnaki. The women were getting information on the arts and how to make beautiful things. The men were getting scientific information, the ones that were initiated into the cult of the snake. And so the Anunnaki got things going. They were just the people, the slaves were happy. They were working. When they got old, they were allowed to retire into the bush. And some of them at some point or other had a mutiny of their own, and they went off in the bush. And these different groups of slaves created all kinds of their own cultures in Africa. And as you'll see later on, when things get tough, as they do in several points, when Nibiru comes close and when Mount Toba goes off, they start migrating out of Africa. But in the meantime, right now, everything's successful. They're getting gold. The gold's going to Nibiru. Everything's working fine. And then Nibiru comes close and it ruins the crops on Earth. It makes things really bad. And the slaves now basically start working for the Anunnaki. What the heck are we doing all this yellow stuff for? Let's get some food. Let's make our own life. We don't need these guys anymore. They just exploited us. And they developed many cooperative, peaceful societies. Okay.
So we have a bunch of books on Amazon.com on the Anunnaki. So go to Amazon.com and check them out. Anunnaki Gods No More, Legacy of the Gods, False Gods, Marduk, King of the Earth, Evolution of the Gods. I have Ninmah, Mother Humanity, coming soon. Ninharsog, Lady of the Mountain, and From the Dragon at the End of Time series, Genesis, and there's a couple other books out. And check out our website, enkispeaks.com. And there's lots of articles and new coming every day. Dr. Lessin's very prolific. And this is us from the Stargate to the Cosmos Conference in 2018. So thank you for joining us today. Much love, blessings, and
aloha.
Aloha.